Hi, everyone, and welcome into a special edition of the Best Bell Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host for tonight, Bradley Stalder. I'm going to jump into a Thursday night player rankings preview. So if you haven't been following me on Twitter, you can do so at FF Stalder. I have my Fantasy Pros rankings posted on an article that I'll be attaching. Okay, so I'll attach the rankings on my Friday article for fantasy data, where I go deeper into some of the Sunday and Monday slate games where I think I'm higher or lower versus consensus going into, the weekend. So I want to give a Thursday night preview for some of the players. Well, most of the important fantasy players on the offensive side of the ball, where my rankings are right now. Compared to the expert consensus, it's Wednesday night. The expert consensus might change, and I might be changing my rankings just based on new information as we find out more, or reporters give us new information. My rankings may change, but I will be updating them throughout Thursday and Friday and Saturday and Sunday, even leading up to the 1:00 games. This is, of course, a reminder as well. This is not the only game that's happening before the 1 p.m. Eastern slates. There's also the 9:30 a.m. London game between the Packers and the New York Giants. So strap in. We got Thursday night football preview between the Denver Broncos and the Indianapolis Colts. The first player that I'm going to talk about in my Thursday night preview is Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson's expert consensus ranking is quarterback 12. I have him bumped down a little bit to quarterback 13. It has to do with the passing matchups. The Indianapolis Colts have been middle of the pack in allowing quarterback fantasy points so far this year. So that's not really gonna sway me one way or the other. I don't want to move too far off the back end quarterback one that we've seen from Russ so far this year. He's been quarterback 14 on fantasy points per game basis, 16.6. We did see him have a good game week 4 against Vegas, where he finishes the quarterback 3, but some pretty mediocre performances leading up to this game. The difference being passing touchdowns primarily. Russell Wilson threw for 2 passing touchdowns in the game against Vegas. He had 2 total touchdowns through 3 weeks passing. He also rushed more in Vegas, or against the Vegas Raiders, and that's been something that we've noticed a downward trend over the last few years with Russell Wilson. Back in 2020, he rushed for over 500 yards. Last year, in 14 games, just 2 fewer games than 2020, he rushed for 183. Now he's on a 16-game pace for just about 200 rushing yards as well. This is not the same rushing Russell Wilson that we had seen previously, when back in 2015, he had 500 yards. 2014, he had 800. 2013, he had 500. 2017, he had 500. 2020, he had 500 rushing yards. He's just not rushing the ball at the same rate or at the same efficiency as we had seen in the past. I mean, he's almost 34 years old. It's not as though Russell Wilson is a spring chicken anymore. So we have to lower the floor for Russell Wilson in these types of matchups. Plus, it's a Thursday night game, so things can get a little haywire. I don't expect this is a blow up game for Russell Wilson and the Denver Broncos. So I want to be slightly below consensus. We did hear about Russell Wilson having an elbow issue. He should be good to go. There's no worry about his availability in week 5, but I do want to be a little hesitant comparing my rankings to the expert consensus. A similar thought goes with Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan on the season is the quarterback 25 in fantasy points per game, and that is his expert consensus ranking as of Wednesday night going into the Thursday night game. Matt Ryan's not played particularly well. He's on um, a pace that is concerning. He's getting the yards, but only because of two big blow up games. And even with those blow up games of 352 passing yards week one against Houston and 356 against Tennessee, the concern is that both of those games, even with 350 plus passing yards, quarterback 19, quarterback 12, not getting it done. And that's including two passing touchdowns, in week four against Tennessee and another passing touchdown week one against Houston. We just are not seeing the ceiling, and we're seeing more of a floor. Like against Jacksonville, they played well against the Colts. Ryan finished as the quarterback 31 that week, 3 interceptions, 195 passing yards. And that's the thing too about Matt Ryan. If he gets down quickly, he's not the type of quarterback that's good at big time comebacks, right? If we look historically at his time in Atlanta, he's not known for being a garbage time king. So he needs to be keeping pace with the Denver Broncos. And I'm concerned that, the weapons are just not there. Like Michael Pittman is a stud, and I'll talk about Michael Pittman in a moment. But I don't think that there are other receiving options that are elite or blow up, types that can elevate the ceiling for Matt Ryan like Julio Jones and Cal Ridley could in Atlanta. So that's why I'm going to keep being low on Matt Ryan. There's just not reasons for optimism moving against Denver, who is a pretty negative matchup against quarterbacks. I think this is more of a floor game. I don't think it's a 0 or a 5-point game for Matt Ryan, but could we be looking at more of a 12-point game? One passing touchdown for 250 yards. I think that's what we could be looking at, and it's not going to be super pretty for Matt Ryan. So that's why I have him a little below consensus for week 5 Thursday Night Football. Well, the bad news is that the Denver Broncos lost Javonte Williams to an ACL tear, and that leaves the next man up, Melvin Gordon. But reports out of Denver were that if Javonte Williams did not tear his ACL, the Broncos were going to cut Gordon after the week 4 game. And you're thinking to yourself, well, why would they cut Melvin Gordon? It's because he had 4 fumbles in the first 4 games. And Gordon's not been getting a lot of usage. He's been getting enough, but it's not pretty usage. Like week 3, 45% of snaps. That's his highest on the season. It was trending toward Javonte Williams' takeover, but now Javonte Williams out with the ACL injury. And I know that there's some optimism for Melvin Gordon's going to get this bigger role and he's going to be a running back too. And I have hesitancy about that. I think the coaches aren't going to be willing to give Melvin Gordon the full complement of snaps that we saw Javonte Williams have when Gordon was out last year. I just don't think that that's within the range of outcomes. Instead, I think there's going to be more leaning upon other running backs to be splitting the carries. And it's going to get a little ugly behind Melvin Gordon. Could we see 30 to 40% of snaps for Gordon? Yes, I think that is a possibility with him running 12 routes and getting 3 targets or so. I think that is a possibility. 50 yards between the air and on the ground. I don't think this is a ceiling game once again against the Indianapolis Colts, who are a negative rushing matchup against running backs. So I think this is more of like even running back 29 feels high. It could be more like a running back 40 game for Melvin Gordon, but he always has the chance of falling into the end zone. If you look at Melvin Gordon's career, there were 5 different seasons where he's had double-digit total touchdowns. So he does have a nose for the end zone. But the question is Melvin Gordon going to be trusted by this coaching staff to handle majority of the touches out of the backfield? And I'm hedging that the answer is going to be no to the majority. Will he lead the backfield? I think that's the best bet, but still not majority. So I want to be lower than consensus on Melvin Gordon for week 5 Thursday Night Football. We also found out in week 5, leading up to week 5, that Jonathan Taylor is out with a high ankle sprain or a low ankle sprain. Neither here nor there. Nahim Heinz is the lead back. If you want to call it the lead back, he's going to be the lead back. Now, you're thinking to yourself, but Bradley, Nahim Heinz, why are you so high on Nahim Heinz? Originally, I wasn't, because that's not a Nahim Heinz role. Like, he's not Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor's role is not Nahim Heinz' role. But in looking at Nahim Heinz' career, there are 10 different games where Heinz played 50% or more of the snaps. And I think Heinz has a good chance of playing 50% or more of the snaps. Even just this year, looking in 2022, he's played 30 to 40% of snaps in pretty much every game. He's not getting a lot of carries, but he is running a decent amount of routes. 3 of the 4 games, 5 targets. Now, in week 5, I think he's going to get more than 50% of the target or 50% of the snaps. And when Nahim Heinz gets 50% of the snaps or more, on average, he gets 7.5 carries. He gets 7.5 targets. He is on average the running back 20 in full PPR. And his median running back finish those weeks is running back 15. That's inclusive of a running back 4 finish, running back 3 finish, running back 10 finish, running back 7 finish. 4 of his 10 games, he finished as a top 10 PPR running back. Now, once again, my rankings are based on half PPR, so I do want to be lower. I don't think he's going to get, up to running back 15, but that is within the range of outcomes for Nahim Heinz. I want to be higher than consensus on Heinz, given the history and also the need that the Colts have to involve some other pass catchers. Michael Pittman is, of course, I think, going to lead the team in targets. Alec Pierce, I'm going to talk about in a moment. I'm a little higher than consensus on Alec Pierce, but Nahim Heinz, I think, steps up into a nice little role where he could score a touchdown. He's going to be, involved on the ground and through the air. So I'd be very surprised if Nahim Heinz does not get to that 50% snap threshold and doesn't get 7 carries and 7 targets. Okay. And that's what you want for a back end running back 2, mid running back 2, which is where I have Nahim Heinz ranked going into week number 5. If you want to take a contrarian play on the Denver Broncos backfield, it's going to be running back Mike Boone. And hopefully you got your waivers in, or if he's hanging out on your waiver wire, this is a contrarian play. Like, I have Melvin Gordon ranked higher, but it would not surprise me in the least if it's Mike Boone who leads the Denver backfield in touches. Once Javonte Williams went out, Mike Boone set a season high in snap share with 31%. Okay, he played more snaps than Melvin Gordon in week 4. He ran 9 routes. He had 3 carries, 3 targets. He had a catch. 29 total yards. He finished as the running back 52 in very limited work. Now he's going to be rotating in probably as the running back 2. But we've seen Mike Boone, when he's handled, at least 50% of the snaps, like his sample size of 50+% of the snaps, week 17 against Chicago in 2019, he ran 7 routes, 17 carries, 4 red zone carries against Chicago when he was on Minnesota, 160 total yards, 2 receptions. He had a touchdown. He finished as the running back 7 in PPR. So that is the opportunity ceiling for Mike Boone. Do I think that's going to happen? No, I don't think that Mike Boone is going to be the running back 7. But could he finish as the running back 27? I think that's within the range of outcomes. I just want to be higher than consensus on Mike Boone, given the hedge that I made on Melvin Gordon. There are concerns, there are red flags with Gordon and how he's trending. And there are green flags for how Mike Boone has been used in the absence of Javonte Williams. So with that trend and with the history of opportunity ceiling for Mike Boone, I want to be in at least higher than consensus. Now, if consensus moves up to, let's say, 37 or 36, I'm willing to move him up to 35 or 34. I just want to be higher than what my peers think about Mike Boone here. And if you want to take a really deep cut on the Denver backfield, Latavius Murray was signed to the 53-man roster just this week. I don't think that Latavius Murray is going to be getting the majority of carries or majority of touches in the Denver backfield. As I said, he was just signed this week. But he did play pretty well last week in his one game against Minnesota while he was with the New Orleans Saints. He finished as the running back 20. He had 11 carries. He converted his touchdown on his red zone carry. He ran 10 routes. He had a target, 65 total yards. In full PPR, he finished as the running back 20, as I said. And this was in his only game. So I also want to be a little bit higher on Latavius Murray than my peers. He's shown that he can just step into an offense and play. And that's what he did last year, too, for Baltimore, right? There were 5 instances last year for Latavius Murray when he had double-digit carries. And in those games, finished as running back 34, finished as running back 26, running back 39, running back 58, and running back 7 overall. So there is a wide range of outcomes, but looking at where my peers have Latavius Murray, like, if he gets some carries, this could be a boom week. So as I said, I want to be higher than my peers on Latavius Murray. I don't think the ECR is going to bump up too much more, but I think a back end running back 4 is about as high as I'm willing to go for Latavius Murray as we start to see the ECR creep up. And Murray, he was actually offered a 53-man roster spot on the Saints when Denver came and said, we want to sign you, and he rejected the Saints because, he wants to be on Denver. He thinks that their trajectory is better for probably making the playoffs. So Latavius Murray, as I said, I want to be higher than my peers on going into week 5. If you're not sure who to play, I don't know either with regard to who's going to get the majority of carries for the Indianapolis Colts. It might be Dion Johnson. Running back 62 is just too low for Dion Johnson, who could be, I'm not saying he is or will be, but could be the lead back for the Indianapolis Colts. As I said, Nahim Heinz, when he gets 50% or more of the snaps, he still only averages 7.5 carries per game. Not even double-digit carries. Nahim Heinz hasn't had double-digit carries since like week 13 of 2020. It's been a minute for Nahim Heinz getting double-digit carries. And frankly, it's Dion Jackson hasn't had double-digit carries in his career either. So maybe it's Dion Jackson, maybe it's another running back, but whoever it is, this is where you have, in playing the accuracy game for Fantasy Pros accuracy contest, you're competing against your peers, and I want to be higher than running back 62. That's like nothing. So running back 62, is too low. Running back 48, back end running back 4 consideration for Dion Jackson going into week 5. Maybe it's Dion Jackson. Maybe it's Phillip Lindsay. Lindsay was elevated off of the practice squad, and he's running back 80 consensus. I have him at running back 65. Really, it's not that big of a jump to go from running back 80 to running back 65. If we find out Lindsay is inactive, I'll just drop Lindsay off of my list. It doesn't matter. We do know that Lindsay had 1,000 rushing yards each of his first 2 seasons in Denver, 2018 and 2019. It could be a nice little Philip Lindsay revenge game. That's a possibility. But realistically, in 2021, Philip Lindsay, 2.8 yards per carry. He's never been much of a pass catcher, right? He was relying on massive volume at the beginning of his career. And now that's gone. He's an afterthought if you really want to be contrarian, Philip Lindsay, but there's not a ton of optimism. He's a running back 6 for me. It's ugly. But anyone claiming that they know who's going to get double-digit carries for the Indianapolis Colts, they're liars. Okay, we don't know. Maybe it is Philip Lindsay. Maybe it's Dion Jackson. Maybe Nahim Heinz gets his first double-digit carry game in like 2 years. But what's clear is that you don't want to be banking on any of these running backs going into week 5. The only any of these backups, Dion Jackson, Philip Lindsay, Nahim Heinz is the only running back in the Indianapolis Colts backfield that you should feel confident putting into your fantasy lineups. Moving on to wide receivers. The first wide receiver I want to talk about is Cortland Sutton. His expert consensus ranking going into Thursday Night Football is wide receiver 13. I have him at wide receiver 14. I'm just a little bit lower. I like a couple wide receivers higher than Cortland Sutton. If I'm looking at my rankings right now, I haven't published them yet, but for instance, I have Mike Williams higher than Cortland Sutton. So that's one shift that I make, and maybe I move Sutton down a little bit more, but he's got a tough matchup against Rasul Douglas. The Indianapolis Colts are generally pretty tough against wide receivers and giving up fantasy points. Sutton, though, has been a back-end wide receiver 1, a high-end wide receiver 2 in his game so far with Russell Wilson. You have to like that you see 7 targets every game. He's seen 6 red zone targets through 4 games. That's pretty good. And he scored a touchdown in week 4. He's playing nearly 90% of snaps in every single game. He's had 100 or more air yards in 3 of the 4 games and finished as the wide receiver 18 or higher in PPR 3 of those 4 weeks. So I do like Cortland Sutton. I don't want to really move him down too much because it's Russell Wilson, Cortland Sutton. All Sutton needs is a touchdown and 6 catches to really ruin any significant fade. So I think wide receiver 14, putting him there. As I said, I like Mike Williams ahead of Cortland Sutton this week, but I think this is going to be fine. If he busts, that's not going to be a big deal, especially if I'm comparing him to the consensus. A wide receiver I am lower on, much lower on than consensus, is Michael Pittman. And Pittman is coming off the hamstring injury in week 2, but he's played the full complement of snaps at weeks 3 and 4. He's had 9 and 6 targets. He's had 5 total red zone targets in the 3 games he's played. He's had 20 receptions through his 3 games. So it seems like things are trending well for Michael Pittman. But if he doesn't convert, if he has a tough matchup, then that's going to be a problem. And Michael Pittman faces off against Patrick Surtain. And Patrick Surtain is one of the better cornerbacks in the league. If we look at who Surtain has shadowed, and Surtain shadows about 70% of the time. The only time he didn't was against Nico Collins. But in weeks 1, 3, and 4, he limited DK Metcalf to 35 receiving yards on 6 targets. He limited Nico Collins in only 30% snaps to 10 total yards. Brandon Ayuk had 0 catches on 5 targets. So no yards, no catches, 5 targets when Patrick Surtain played against Brandon Ayuk week 3. And then week 4, Devontae Adams had 7 catches on 12 targets for 61 yards against Patrick Surtain. 4 pass breakups. This is a significant downgrade from Michael Pittman. I want to be lower than my peers for Michael Pittman. I think he's a low-end wide receiver too. You need to lower your expectations for Pittman. This is probably not a blow-up game. They're going to have to find other ways to move the ball, and that whether that is through Alec Pierce or through AlieCox or other Nahim Heinz, if this is not going to be a Michael Pittman blow-up game, right? We always have to hedge that Michael Pittman is still a very talented wide receiver, which is why I don't want to completely zero him like how Brandon Ayuk got zeroed week 3 against Surtain. But Michael Pittman is facing a tough matchup. So let's temper expectations going into week 5 for Michael Pittman. Wide receiver Jeudy is expert consensus 30 among wide receivers. I have him down at 38. And my concern with Jeudy is that, of course, he has a difficult matchup, but also looking at what he's done this year, it's been completely boom or bust for Jeudy. And he finishes the wide receiver 12 week 1 in PPR, 102 receiving yards. He broke off one big play, and then that was it. Other than that, like, he's had 6 or fewer targets in every game aside from week 1. He's had 2 games of 4 receptions. The other 2 games, 2 and 1 reception. Now, in week 2, he only played 17% of snaps, which fine, whatever. But played 60% of snaps in week 3, still 85, wide receiver 85. He is working his way back from the shoulder issue, but I don't expect this to be, again, a blow-up game, right? Jeudy, maybe he breaks off one big play, which is what it takes for Jeudy to break consensus. But I am lower, significantly lower on Jeudy. He is not a wide receiver 3 for me, like my peers think he is. He's outside of that for me. I've been anti-Jeudy since the offseason. You can see all of my videos. You can see my TikTok, because in a minute, I'm going to need you to stop drafting Jeudy in round 5. I told you don't draft Jeudy round 5. And what do? Draft him round 5. And he's had 2 blow-up games. He's had 2 virtual zeros. So he's a wide receiver 47 on the season. He does have 2 receiving touchdowns. He is going deep like he was in 2020 when Drew Lock was the quarterback. His yards per reception is 16.6 for the year. He's on trajectory for career highs, but that's because of the blow-up games. I am concerned that Jeudy won't be able to access certain ceilings in a week-to-week matchup. So, as I mentioned earlier against Cortland Sutton, the wide receivers tend to have difficult matchups against the Colts. We know Kenny Moore is a pretty tough cornerback, so we'll see where Jeudy lines up. But ultimately, it's a negative downgrade, and unless Jeudy rips off a spike play, he's not going to meet his expert consensus ranking. A wide receiver I am significantly higher on for the Colts is Alec Pierce. And Alec Pierce, he's been trudging in that 40 to 50% snap share every week. So week 1, 3, and 4. In 3 games, he's been at 49, 44, 46% snaps. So he really hasn't broken out as a full-time player yet. But we've seen him trusted more in weeks 3 and 4. It's exactly what you want. He's primed for this could be the week. And I'd rather, get this one right than, just he's whatever. This is, I think, where we should be appropriately pricing Alec Pierce. Week 3, he was wide receiver 51 full PPR. Week 4, he was wide receiver 33 in full PPR, and these are half PPR rankings. Wide receiver 45 is a half PPR, but still, it's not going to shift too terribly much. Looking at Alec Pierce, 6 targets, 46% snap share. He's getting targeted when he's on the field, 22% target rate. That's not too bad for a rookie. and especially one who's not playing full time. So his average target distance is 13.5 yards, which is in the top 20 among wide receivers. He's getting quality targets. He's 25th among wide receivers in that. His yards per reception, he's a downfield threat, which, he's a speedster. 90th percentile speed, 95th percentile speed score. He's 6'3", 208, and he can run a 4.4 40. He also has a huge catch radius, 96th percentile. So maybe this is the game that Alec Pierce breaks out. Even if he doesn't, wide receiver 45 is significantly higher than my peers. It's either him or Ashton Dulin, right? And Dulin just flopped last week, and that was a bad call by me. But an 11% target share is interesting if he can get that snap share up from 47% on the season. So, I want to be higher than my peers on Alec Pierce. He's got a 32% target rate versus man coverage. And if he can break one deep, this is a spike week type of player. And if, Michael Pittman is drawing a lot of attention, which we would expect he is, Alec Pierce could get a bigger game here, already having 11 targets over the last 2 games and over 70 air yards. So Matt Ryan's willing to throw it down the field to Alec Pierce. I like him as a wide receiver sleeper this week. If you want to talk about wide receivers who are just running meaningless routes, that's Paris Campbell. Paris Campbell has not run fewer than 24 routes and not played fewer than 66% of snaps. However, in the 4 games that Paris Campbell has played so far, he has 12 targets, averages 3 targets a game. Alec Pierce has a much higher target rate in playing 2/3 to half of the snaps that Paris Campbell's playing. Eventually, Paris Campbell's going to need to be phased out. He's just not good. I mean, last week, he had 4 catches for 43 yards, finished as a wide receiver 46 in full PPR. But he ran a season low 24 routes. His snap share went down significantly. And I think that the Colts are going to have to find ways to manufacture offense. I think Denver's offense is better than the Colts, and they're going to be looking for Alec Pierce. They're going to be looking for AlieCox and Michael Pittman Jr. and maybe some Ashton Dulin. But Paris Campbell is an absolute 0 starter for me. If you want him, I moved him up just 2 spots, but that it's virtually meaningless when we get down to these. There is not optimism about Paris Campbell going into week 5, though. A lowered snap share, lowered routes, never more than 4 targets in a game this season. Season high is 4 receptions in a game. It's ugly for Paris Campbell. You should not have optimism for him going into week 5. Same thing with KJ Hamler, right? So KJ Hamler not running a lot of routes. I mean, week 3, coming off the injury, only ran 25% of routes, or had 25% snap share, 8% snap share week 4. He ran 6 routes and 2 routes. He had a huge touchdown. His 1 target was a 55-yard touchdown reception, or it wasn't even a touchdown, just a 55-yard reception. Fell short of the end zone, 46 air yards. And that's what KJ Hamler is, the occasional spike week. But 6.5 fantasy points, not going to get it done. You got to fade KJ Hamler. He's not a full-time player. And with Sutton and Jeudy playing ahead of Hamler pretty much every snap, it's not exciting. Okay. So you should fade Hamler, not a player that I have in any of my lineups. Tight end, I'm excited about Mo AlieCox. Finally, team preseason Mo AlieCox starting to trend the right way. Just as how we saw a season low in snap share for Paris Campbell, we saw a season high snap share for Mo AlieCox. Mo AlieCox playing 67% of the snaps. He ran season high 23 routes, had a season high 6 targets, 2 red zone targets, which he converted both of them into touchdowns. He finished as the tight end 2 in full PPR. He had 85 receiving yards. I do not think that is what's going to happen in week 5. The tight end matchup is very difficult against the Denver Broncos, but you have to think that this is we need to have a little bit more optimism about Mo AlieCox. If you play 2/3 of the snaps on a Matt Ryan offense, we saw Jelani Woods score 2 touchdowns a couple weeks ago. So Mo AlieCox and the other tight ends are being looked for in the red zone. Those are the types of things that you like to see for your tight ends. So I want to be a little bit higher than consensus on Mo AlieCox. I'm not saying he's a top 12. I'm not saying he's a top 15, but I want to be a little bit higher than consensus on Mo AlieCox because of the increased snap share, the increased targets, the increased routes run. And, the reality is that Kylan Granson, while I did like him as a prospect and he's played a decent amount of snaps and ran some routes, it's Mo AlieCox playing over Kylan Granson. So that's how you should rank them, is Mo AlieCox over Kylan Granson. A tight end you have to be out on now and is droppable in nearly every format is Albert Okwuegbunam. Okwuegbunam, it was a disaster week 4. And we have to be worried about the way in which things are trending. He started week 1 at almost 69% of the snaps, 53% in week 2, 31% week 3, 2%. He played a singular snap week 4 against the Vegas Raiders. He ran no routes. He was running 20 routes even in week 3. Zip, zero, nilch, nada. I don't know if Okwuegbunam's in the doghouse or if he just doesn't know the offense, or if he just fell out of favor. Whatever the reason, Albert Okwuegbunam is not at all rosterable on almost any format. Get rid of him. Or if there's some Okwuegbunam truther, get something for him. Trade him. I don't know. Whatever it is, he's tight end 39 for me. I only rank 39 tight ends. He's very close to being not ranked. That's how it is. He's not even a tight end 2 consideration or in a tight end 2 tight end league. You don't want Okwuegbunam. This is a player that unfortunately, I was wrong about. I had very high expectations for Okwuegbunam going into the 2022 season. It just has not translated. And we'll see if Greg Dulcich is the one, or if there's, Tomlinson or Subert or whoever it is running routes at tight end for the Denver Broncos starts to see some increase or more consistency. Until then, it's pretty much the Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy show among pass catchers in Denver. The last player to talk about, Kylan Granson. Now, we talk about Kylan Granson because he's playing 50% of the snaps for the Indianapolis Colts at tight end. He is ranked lower, as I mentioned, compared to Mo AlieCox. I have Mo AlieCox at tight end 18 this week. Kylan Granson, tight end 32. I rank 39, so he's ranked, but pretty low. He did run 14 routes. 2 of his 4 games, he has 4 targets or more. In week 1, he had 7. Week 4, he had 4 targets. He set a season high 4 receptions, 62 receiving yards, 31 air yards. So he's playing pretty close to the line of scrimmage. He finished at the tight end 12 in fantasy points in week 4. I don't think that's replicable, but tight end 32, I'm a little higher than my peers. He's finished as a top 31 tight end 3 of the last 4 weeks. Tight end 32, fine. I'll take a couple points of differential there. Maybe I bump him up a little bit more just to see if I can squeeze out a few more points in this competition. But that's where I have Kylan Granson going into week 5. that'll do it for the Thursday night week 5 preview. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Jose, thank you for jumping in. He says good info. I appreciate you tuning in and all the rest of the viewers and listeners. If you like what you hear, hit the subscribe button, the like button, give some comments. If you want to know start sits, comment on the YouTube videos. I do my best to respond to those as soon as I can. In the meantime, it's going to be a lot of fun watching Thursday Night Football against the Colts and the Denver Broncos. Despite the loss of Javonte Williams and Jonathan Taylor for this matchup, it would have been much, much more fun seeing those two square off against each other. But here we are. We've got Thursday Night Football coming up against the Broncos and the Indianapolis Colts. In the meantime, check out my article on Fantasy Data that's going to drop on Friday for the rest of my higher or lower versus expert consensus players. In the meantime, good luck in the fantasy football streets, everybody.